Welcome back, my friend. The lamps are lit, the wind has quieted, and somewhere in the shadows the Niffler has found something shiny again. But this time, it's not gold. It's a story, and tonight, he's ready to share it with you. So settle in and listen closely. It begins like this.
The night was quiet and velvety, filled only with the soft rustle of wind outside the window. In a secluded cottage at the edge of the woods, Luna Lovegood sat at her table, surrounded by piles of the quibbler and unfinished drawings of fantastical creatures. Her home, much like her mind, was always full of wondrous things that existed on the border of reality and imagination. She rarely slept deeply, her consciousness always a light breeze drifting between the visible and invisible worlds. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a gentle tap at the window. Luna looked up, her large, dreamy eyes focusing on the silhouette of an owl perched on the sill. It wasn't her usual, slightly disheveled but loyal tawny owl. This owl was larger, with dark gray feathers, almost invisible in the gloom, and held a thick, old-fashioned envelope in its beak. It emanated something familiar, yet unusual. Luna carefully opened the window, and the owl, softly fluttering, landed on the edge of her table. It didn't look like an owl that had just completed a typical flight. Its feathers were dusted with something resembling stardust, and its eyes glowed with a strange, almost unearthly light. The envelope it held was made of thick, yellowish parchment, sealed with an antique wax seal bearing an image that looked like a smiling moon. Luna took the letter, her fingers feeling a faint, almost imperceptible pulse of magic emanating from the envelope. This was more than just a magical letter, it was a message steeped in time. The owl seemed to have completed its mission. It cocked its head, looked at Luna, and then silently flew out into the night, leaving behind only a gentle breeze and a sense of something profoundly important. Luna traced her fingers over the coarse parchment. Her gaze skimmed to the date inscribed on the back of the envelope. Her heart did a strange flip. The date was impossible. It showed a year when Luna was in her 6th year at Hogwarts. Many years ago. The letter should have arrived decades ago, when her father, Xenophilius Lovegood, was still alive and full of his wondrous, sometimes perplexing ideas. One might doubt, think of a prank or a strange temporal anomaly. But Luna was never ordinary. She believed in what others didn't, saw what others missed. And when her gaze fell upon the handwriting on the envelope, so familiar, with characteristic flourishes that danced between the facets of the letters, as if each stroke had its own strange logic, she had no doubts left. It was her father's handwriting. His hand, his thoughts, his magic. Xenophilius had died several years ago, having plunged into a search for something elusive that he believed could revolutionize the understanding of magic. Luna had grieved for him, but her sorrow had always been calm, filled with a belief that he had simply embarked on his greatest journey. But this letter, it was not just a memory. It was a message from the very heart of his journey. She carefully broke the seal, feeling a slight resistance from the ancient magic. Inside was only a single sheet, densely covered in her father's script, and something else, a thin, almost weightless piece of parchment, folded in half. Xenophilius was always a man of secrets, hidden meanings, and strange illusions. Luna remembered how, in her childhood, when other children laughed at his belief in crumplehorn snorkacks and rackspurts, he always told her, "Not everything magical is charming. Sometimes it's sad, Luna, but it's still part of the great mystery." She felt that sad magic now, touching the paper that held his last words. The lines were written, as if he had penned them already knowing something. His voice seemed to echo from the pages, calm yet piercing. He didn't explain why the letter had arrived so late, or how he had managed to send it. He simply moved to the crux of the matter, to the riddle that was his final gift. "My dear Luna, if this letter reaches you, it means I have found what I was looking for, or at least come close to it. Remember our talks by the fireplace, when I told you about invisible worlds, about how the thin threads of reality intertwine with what we consider fiction. Some secrets, my daughter, cannot be unveiled in a waking world." Luna felt a faint shiver run down her spine, but it wasn't fear. It was excitement, a premonition of something grand that had always been there, just waiting to be noticed. And then, at the very end of the letter, was a phrase, written in slightly larger letters, as if he wanted her to remember it. A phrase that glowed with a special, mysterious magic. That which vanishes in memory appears in dreams. Return to where the sky was inverted. Where the sky was inverted, Luna whispered. She remembered that place. It was from one of his favorite, most enigmatic bedtime stories. And that place was connected to Hogwarts. Father always said that the greatest secrets often hid in plain sight, or where no one thought to look. This letter was not about his death, but about the continuation of his life, his ideas, his quests. He was giving her a task, his final adventure. Luna felt her heart fill with a strange sensation, as if something that had been lost had found its way home again. The dawn light barely touched the windows of Luna's cottage as she unfolded her father's letter. Besides the mysterious phrase, there was another, smaller piece of parchment inside, a half-decayed fragment of a map. It was as thin as papyrus and smelled of something dry, like ancient herbs and forgotten libraries. The map was drawn in her father's hand, but it had no names of countries or cities, only whimsical, intertwining lines that resembled tree roots or leaf veins. In the center of the fragment was a single, clearly marked symbol, an inverted tower lying on its side. A dotted line led to the tower, disappearing into a chaotic jumble of something resembling clouds or fog. Around the tower were scattered drawings, flying fish dancing in the air, stars falling into wells, and a smiling moon, exactly like the one on the wax seal. Luna traced her finger over the map. This was not a map of a real place. She knew Hogwarts like the back of her hand, but no corner of the castle or its surrounding grounds matched these markings. An inverted tower? Flying fish? She checked every cartography textbook she owned, but found nothing similar. This map showed a place that had never existed in the physical world. It was a map not for the body, but for the mind. It was encrypted not with runes, but with symbols that spoke to the imagination. Next to the map were several carelessly scribbled numbers, scattered without apparent logic, 7, 3, 11, 4, and below them, a row of strange symbols that belonged to no known runic alphabet or numerological system. They looked like tiny, tangled threads hanging in the air. This was a cipher, undoubtedly, and it was as whimsical and unique as Xenophilius himself. It could only be his cipher. He always left her such puzzles, even in childhood, teaching her to look for answers where others saw only disarray. Luna closed her eyes, trying to feel the energy of these symbols. She recalled countless evenings spent by the crackling fireplace, when her father, Xenophilius, sat wrapped in his whimsical robes, telling her about the space between things. "Remember, Luna," he would say, his voice as soft as rustling pages, "that the greatest mysteries exist not in what we see, but in what lies between them. Between thoughts, between dreams, between an inhale and an exhale. That's where the snorkacs dance, where the rackspurts hide, and where you'll find the answers you seek. Don't look directly. Look around, and you will see what exists in the gaps, in the silence, in the forgotten places." He taught her to look at the patterns on the wall and see not just cracks, but a map of hidden paths. He asked her to listen to the sound of the wind and hear not just a breeze, but the whispers of ancient spirits. He taught her to read the space between things, to seek meaning where others saw only absence. And then, looking at these mysterious numbers and symbols, Luna understood. 7, 3, 11, 4. These were not ordinary numbers. These were numbers that pointed to gaps in time or space associated with Hogwarts. Perhaps they were hours of the day, just beyond clear rationality. And the symbols? They weren't writing. They were emotions that could be read intuitively. They represented not things, but feelings, longing, anticipation, dreams. The map was not for her feet, but for her soul. It didn't show a path to a physical location, but to a memory, to a dream, to a state of consciousness where reality was inverted. The decision came to Luna naturally, like breathing. She had to go. This letter was not just her father's legacy, but an invitation to a new adventure that could help her understand him, and herself, much more deeply. Hogwarts was the only place where, according to her father, the sky could be inverted without the complete breakdown of reality. It was a space where magic allowed wonder to exist. She quickly packed a small travel bag, a change of clothes, her wand, an empty journal for notes, and of course, the letter and map fragment pressed tightly to her heart. She wasn't going to inform the ministry. This was a personal matter, a journey between worlds that bureaucrats would hardly understand. Only one formality remained, to get permission to return to Hogwarts. Luna decided to approach Headmistress Minerva McGonagall directly. She knew that Minerva, while stern and pragmatic, had a deep understanding of wonder and eccentricity, especially when it concerned her students, particularly Luna. She sent a short message by owl to Hogwarts, a request for a temporary stay at the castle for personal research purposes concerning ancient magical traditions. She expected, perhaps, detailed questions, explanations as to why now. The reply came swiftly, almost instantly at dawn. It was a brief note from Minerva. Luna, you have always been a child who saw more than most. Welcome back home. Guest rooms in the West Tower await you. I shall ask no unnecessary questions. The last phrase warmed Luna's heart. Minerva understood. Perhaps not the essence of her journey, but the importance of her need to follow this strange thread. It was permission not just to return to Hogwarts, but to seek what existed beyond the obvious. With that thought, Luna stepped out of her cottage, her steps light, filled with determination. Hogwarts awaited, and with it, the mystery hidden in the very heart of dreams. Hogwarts greeted Luna with the familiar scent of old magic, dust, and something sweet, like honey and secrets. She settled into the designated room in the West Tower, where the windows overlooked the forbidden forest, slumbering in the evening sun. Minerva asked no unnecessary questions, merely offering a perceptive gaze that seemed to see all, and wishing her luck in her research. As night fell, Hogwarts plunged into deep slumber. The walls sighed, portraits softly snored, and only the ghostly footsteps of the caretaker echoed in the distance. Luna, turning her father's mysterious map over in her mind, decided to start with what she felt most strongly, the inverted tower. According to her intuition and childhood memories, this was an old, abandoned classroom on the 7th floor, once used for ancient runes lessons. From there, her father used to say, one could see the sky touching the ground. She glided easily through the quiet corridors, her steps light as a breath. Reaching the classroom, Luna pushed the door, and it creaked open, releasing the scent of ages of dust and forgottenness. The room was empty, furnished only with sheet-covered desks and a blackboard on which old runic symbols barely showed through. Moonlight, piercing through the tall arched windows, bathed the room in a silvery glow. Luna stepped inside. The air was still and heavy, but unlike ordinary dust, there was a strange tension in it. She took out her father's map. The inverted tower on it did not correspond to the actual outlines of the classroom. She was looking for the space between things, as her father had taught her. She closed her eyes, feeling a faint magical tremor that permeated the walls. When she opened her eyes again, something had changed. The moonlight falling on the floor cast long shadows from the furniture. But one shadow, belonging to an old, broken cupboard in the corner, behaved strangely. It didn't just lie on the floor, it slowly, as if made of rubber, began to move backward, receding from the cupboard, as if rewinding time. The air around it trembled, and Luna felt a faint, barely perceptible scent of old leather and ink, a smell that belonged only to her father's study. It was a sign that she was on the right path. Luna's heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from anticipation. The shadow moving backward pointed her to an unassuming part of the wall where, it seemed, there was nothing but old plaster and cracks. She approached closer, her fingers touching the cold stone. In the spot where the shadow moved, the stone seemed a little softer, more yielding, as if it wanted to let her through. Luna remembered her father's words that some doors open only for those who believe they are not there. This was a corridor that wasn't there, not in the physical world. She clutched her wand and, gathering all her faith in the invisible, pressed against the wall. The wall didn't open. It simply dissolved, transforming into a shimmering, misty curtain through which a soft, golden light shone. Luna felt her body pass through something dense but incorporeal, as if through a cloud. The passage was instantaneous, and when she emerged on the other side, the air was entirely different, warm, saturated with the scent of herbs and something that reminded her of her childhood. She found herself in a narrow, curving corridor, whose walls shimmered with a soft, starry light that had no discernible source. This was not the stone of Hogwarts. These were walls built of light and memory. This was a place that existed only for those who truly dream, as her father's letter had said. This was her first dream vision. The real Hogwarts slept, but here, in this hidden plane, it awakened in its most wondrous form. Under Luna's feet was no stone, but something soft and springy like a cloud. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, curving and branching into strange arches. From afar, music drifted, quiet, melodic, like a lullaby, but woven from 1,000 voices. She took a step forward, and each of her movements felt as if she were walking on water, not solid ground. This was a world where the laws of reality were different, softer, more yielding to the power of thought and memory. The corridor led her deeper into this strange world. The walls were not just made of light, they were living canvases on which blurred images flickered. Faces she once knew, scenes that appeared and vanished like mirages. These were echoes of memories floating in this space. Suddenly, from one of the side branches of the corridor, a sound reached her, causing her to stop, her heart clenching with familiar pain and warmth. It was her father's voice. He wasn't speaking, he was laughing. His laugh was as infectious, as full of wonder and kindness, as it had been in life. It rang out clear and free, filling this ghostly corridor with joy. Luna followed the sound. The voice led her to a small, circular room that looked like her father's study in its prime. The walls were laden with stacks of books, strange artifacts, and drawings. The air smelled of ink, paper, and his favorite tea. In the center of the room, as if in a swirl of light, stood a young Xenophilius Lovegood, just as she remembered him from childhood. He wore his usual yellow robes, his eyes sparkling. He laughed, adjusting his whimsical spectacles, as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. He didn't see her, for this was merely an echo, preserved in this space of dreams and memory. Luna felt her own eyes well up with tears, but these were tears not just of sorrow, but of incredible, almost painful joy. She had not heard his laugh with such clarity since his death. This was not just a memory, it was his living echo, pulsating in this world. He was here, in this room, filled with his essence. She stood, not daring to move, afraid of disturbing this magical moment. She watched him, his face, his movements, his happiness. This was him, her father, as she loved him, full of wonder, joy, and boundless faith in the unseen. He was a part of her childhood, brought to life in this magical corridor. And this was just the beginning of her journey. Luna stood in her father's ghostly study, gazing at his laughing echo. She wanted to stay there forever, in this living memory where he was happy and unharmed. But the air around Xenophilius began to shimmer, his outlines blurring, as if his presence in this dream world was as fleeting as everything else. The voice quieted, then vanished, leaving Luna once again in a silence filled only with the echo of her own breathing. She looked around. The walls of the ghostly study were not static. As she watched, their contours began to change right before her eyes, smoothly shifting from one form to another. Bookcases dissolved, transforming into tall, Gothic arches. The old, cozy study morphed into a vast, luminous hall, reminiscent of the Great Hall at Hogwarts, but without tables, filled only with a soft, pulsing light. Then, just as suddenly, this hall shrank, contracted, transforming into a small, intimate room where the walls were adorned with strange, moving frescoes depicting fantastic creatures, the kind that exist only in dreams and on the pages of the Quibbler. These frescoes flickered and moved, creating the illusion of an endless gallery. Time in this place did not flow linearly. Past, present, and even future, it seemed intertwined, forming a kaleidoscope of possibilities. Luna perceived this not as chaos, but as an organic flow, where every moment was accessible if one knew how to look at it. This space was a living, breathing reflection of memory, flowing freely, unrestricted by usual boundaries. She realized that this world was not just a reproduction of memories, but their living embodiment, allowing free movement between them, if one understood its strange logic. The room continued to change, transforming into different rooms, different landscapes, that seemed to exist only in someone's imagination. It was captivating and somewhat unsettling, but Luna, with her usual ability to embrace wonder, merely smiled. She was home. The next transformation was one of the most poignant. The luminous gallery dissolved, and Luna found herself in the familiar, though slightly altered, living room of her and her father's cottage. The air was filled with the scent of homemade magical concoctions and printing ink, which always accompanied the work on the Quibbler. And there, in the center of the room, sat two figures. It was herself, a little girl, about 6 or 7 years old, with disheveled blonde hair and huge, inquisitive eyes, and her father, Xenophilius, lost in thought. Little Luna sat on the rug, arranging intricate patterns from pebbles and colored threads, patterns only she could see. Her childish face was focused, filled with the same deep, inner dreaminess that had accompanied her all her life. She occasionally glanced at her father, who sat in his armchair, diligently writing something in a large notebook. Adult Luna watched them, invisible, just as in the previous memories. She saw how her father, from time to time, would look up from his notes and gaze at little Luna playing on the floor. There was no distraction or indifference in his eyes. There was boundless love and a deep, almost reverent understanding. He didn't just see a child playing. He saw the world that existed in her imagination, and he took it as seriously as his own. He smiled, his lips moving almost imperceptibly, as if sharing thoughts with his daughter without words. Luna remembered that it was at that time he always emphasized the importance of believing in the impossible, because only then could one see the shadows dancing in the corners. It was a moment of pure, direct connection that she, as a child, took for granted, but now, as an adult, understood its true value. She saw how her father, even immersed in his extravagant ideas, always found time for her world, for her imagination. This was his true love. The childhood memories slowly began to fade, but not to disappear completely, but rather to linger somewhere on the periphery. The cottage living room transformed into a space resembling an observatory, but instead of telescopes, there were strange, flickering mechanisms that spun like miniature galaxies. This space breathed with a quiet, powerful flow of magic. Xenophilius, young again, stood in the center of this space. He wasn't writing, wasn't playing with his daughter. His face was concentrated, even strained. He held an object in his hands that Luna remembered, but had never understood its true purpose. It was an amulet, small, made of dark, polished wood, inlaid with tiny pieces of moonstone that glowed faintly, as if reflecting the light of distant stars. The amulet had an unusual shape, something between a spiral and an endless knot. It emitted a faint, pulsing warmth. As Xenophilius carefully turned it in his hands, the moonstones on its surface began to flicker faster, and the air around him warped, like an image in water. Luna felt that this was not just an ornament. She remembered how, in her childhood, when her father sometimes took it out, strange smells appeared in the house, and sometimes she heard voices that shouldn't have been there. Xenophilius then said that the amulet helps to remember what was forgotten. But now, seeing it in this world of dreams, Luna understood its true nature. It was an amulet that turns memory. It didn't just reproduce memories, it could alter their flow, allowing one to delve deeper, find hidden details, and perhaps even influence them. It was the key to this world. Xenophilius used it to dive into his own memories, to find something that had vanished. He carefully placed the amulet on a small pedestal in the center of the observatory. The amulet began to glow brighter, and around it appeared faint, ghostly images that flickered and vanished, like an endless stream of thoughts. These were fragments of his own life, his quests, his doubts. And this was the key to the next part of her journey. Her father hadn't just left her a letter. He had left her a tool for understanding his inner world, so that she could see him not only as a father, but also as a person, with all his searches and aspirations. The ghostly observatory began to shift once more, its shimmering mechanisms fading away to give place to a new, strangely familiar space. Luna found herself in a room whose walls were lined with bookshelves, overflowing with folios on magical zoology and herbology. On one of the tables, neatly laid out, were open textbooks, beside which stood a half-empty teacup and several corrected parchments with childish scribbles. This was her room, or rather, the room she might have come to inhabit. On the opposite wall stood a large, antique mirror. Its frame was crafted from tarnished silver, inlaid with carved images of moon phases. Luna approached it, feeling no surprise, only a peculiar premonition. As she gazed into the reflective surface, she saw not her own reflection. Instead, in the mirror stood she herself, but a little older, with a wise, calm gaze. She wore a dark green robe bearing the Hogwarts emblem, and a silver teacher's badge gleamed on her chest. She saw her reflection smiling gently, holding an open book. Behind her, a familiar classroom was visible, filled with students listening attentively. But that wasn't all. In the background, in a comfortable armchair by the fireplace, sat her father, Xenophilius. He looked significantly healthier than Luna remembered him in the last years of his life. His eyes sparkled with intellectual curiosity, and a light, familiar smile played on his lips as he read a fresh copy of the Quibbler. Luna's heart clenched with an incredible feeling, a mixture of joy and acute sorrow. In this reflection, in this mirror world, her father was alive. She had become what she might have always dreamed of being, a Hogwarts professor, continuing the tradition of knowledge. Their world here was different, fuller, less traumatic. Luna stood frozen before the mirror, captivated as she watched the life that could have been. In the reflection, she saw her mirrored self finishing a lesson, students gathering around her, asking questions, and her answering with her characteristic wisdom and patience. Then, after the bell, her reflection walked over to the fireplace, where Xenophilius was already waiting for her. They spoke, their voices soft and warm, and Luna felt tears stream down her cheeks. These were tears not only of joy, but of the realization of what she had lost. In this mirror world, she was not alone. She had her work, her students, and her living father, with whom she could share her thoughts and ideas, with whom she could laugh together at the latest theories about crumple-horned snorkaks. The temptation was incredibly strong. To stay here, in this world where her grief didn't exist, where her father was by her side, it seemed so peaceful, so right. She could simply step into the mirror, cross that thin line between dream and possible reality, and never return to her solitude. Her fingers instinctively touched the cold, reflective surface. She thought she felt a faint touch in return, warm and comforting. This place felt so cozy, so homely, unlike her empty cottage and the ghostly corridors of this dream world. What seemed like an eternity passed as Luna stood, unable to tear her gaze from her happy reflection and her father. She almost succumbed to the temptation, almost believed that this was the true path, a detour that would allow her to feel the fullness of life again. But then, amidst this enchanting spectacle, Luna noticed one strange detail, something that jarred with the perfect picture. She looked more closely at her reflection and her father. They talked, they laughed, but her father's reflection never looked directly into the eyes of his mirrored daughter. His gaze drifted somewhere nearby, focusing on books, on the fireplace, on anything but the face of his mirrored Luna. Even when she was telling him something, her reflection smiled at him, but his eyes never met hers. It was a subtle detail, but for Luna, who always paid attention to the slightest nuances, it was glaring. Xenophilius Lovegood, her real father, always looked her in the eye. His gaze was direct, open, even when he spoke of the most incredible things. He saw her, the real Luna, behind all her eccentricity and dreaminess. This mirrored Xenophilius was merely a shell, lacking the main characteristic of her father, his ability to truly see and accept her completely. Suddenly, the illusion began to crumble. The perfect picture lost its appeal, seemed artificial, devoid of a true soul. It was merely an imprint of desire, created by her own memory and longing, but not true life. She realized that by staying here, she would deceive herself, settling into a false peace where her father would never truly see her. The temptation vanished, dissipating like morning mist. All that remained was the bitter realization that escaping into a world of dreams, however alluring, could not replace real life, with all its losses and pain. She had to move on, to seek her father's true message, not his shadow in a mirror. With a sigh, Luna tore her gaze from the reflective surface. The room began to change again, dissolving into a shimmer, preparing her for the next stage of her journey through the world of dreams. The image of her mirrored self and her untrue father slowly faded, leaving only the empty, dull silver of the mirror. The room with the mirror dissolved, transforming into a light mist, and then Luna felt her feet touch something soft and damp. The air changed, filling with the sense of dew, earth, and hundreds of unfamiliar yet sweet fragrances. When the mist cleared, Luna found herself in a vast, ethereal garden. This was no ordinary garden. The trees here were woven from light, their branches shimmering, and their leaves rustling, emitting a quiet, almost inaudible whisper. The paths were not paved with stones, but with thin, intertwined threads of moonlight. But the most astonishing were the flowers. They grew everywhere in strange, unearthly splendor, glowing in various shades, from pale blue to vibrant purple, from translucent white to deep amber. Luna bent down to one of them. It resembled a firefly, pulsating in the air. When she touched it, she felt a faint, barely perceptible echo of a thought. Not a word, not an image, but simply a feeling, a forgotten melody, a long-lost laugh, a fleeting moment of peace. Luna suddenly understood. Each flower in this garden is a thought someone forgot. Dreams that evaporated from memory, ideas that never found their embodiment, promises that remained unspoken. They didn't disappear completely, but settled here, in this hidden garden, like dew on petals. The garden was filled with these glowing flowers, each a unique imprint of someone's consciousness. Luna walked among them, feeling their delicate energy. She saw flowers emanating a slight sadness, others, pure, childlike delight, still others, the forgotten wisdom of an elder. This was not just a garden, it was a repository of collective, invisible memory, existing between worlds. She felt her father's presence in this place. This was his world, his understanding of the space between things. He collected these forgotten thoughts, like a herbarium, so they could be felt again. Luna walked deeper into the garden, her feet seeming to guide her. She wasn't looking for anything specific, but felt something calling her. At the edge of a small clearing, where the light was especially soft, she noticed a flower that glowed differently than the others. It was a more delicate, almost transparent blue hue, and it emitted a steady, barely perceptible warmth. Luna approached closer. This flower, unlike the others, pulsed not only with thought, but with feeling. When Luna carefully touched it, she felt a familiar, unparalleled rush of emotions. It was the smell of books and freshly baked pie, a soft touch to her hair, a gentle voice singing a lullaby. It was the feeling of safety, boundless love, and quiet wisdom. This was her mother's flower, Pandora Lovegood, who had died so long ago when Luna was still a child, from a botched experiment. Her memory had always been somewhat blurry for Luna, as if through a fog. But here, in this garden, her mother's thought, her essence, was alive. Luna pressed herself to the flower, closing her eyes. She felt tears stream down her cheeks, but these were tears of release, not sorrow. It was a feeling of warmth she had missed so much. She felt as if her mother was embracing her, as if she understood all her doubts and joys. This was not just a memory, but a living connection that existed beyond time and space. Her father, knowing how Luna missed her mother, had created this place to preserve this important part of her heart. He understood that some memories could not simply be forgotten. She spent a long time there, absorbing this warmth, feeling her own memories of her mother grow brighter, clearer. The flower pulsed, sharing its soft, eternal energy. It was a gift, and Luna accepted it with gratitude. The warmth of her mother's flower slowly began to fade, and with it, its brilliance. Luna felt the magic in the garden begin to wane. She looked around, and her heart clenched with alarm. The glowing flowers, which had just flickered with millions of colors, began to dim. Some of them shriveled, their petals seemingly wilting, crumbling into tiny, glowing particles that vanished into the air. The change was swift and relentless. The light permeating the garden grew paler, and the shadows lengthened. The whisper of the light trees turned into a moan, and even the scent of dew began to be replaced by something stale, like old, forgotten things. Something was destroying the garden. It was not a physical attack, but a slow, inexorable fading, as if this place was reaching its expiration date. Perhaps it was the nature of the dream vision itself, which could not last forever. Or perhaps this garden, like everything that existed beyond reality, required constant nourishment, constant belief. Her mother's flower also began to dim, its blue glow fading. Luna stretched out her hand, trying to hold on to it, but felt its warmth disappear. It was painful, like a second parting. Suddenly, there was a feeling that memory was weakening. Not her own memory, but the memory of this place, which sustained the garden. It seemed that someone's, perhaps even her father's, memory, which had created and supported this world, was beginning to dissipate. This place, this world of dreams, was created by his faith and his ideas. If he faded, then the garden and everything in it would also dissolve. Luna realized she didn't have much time. She couldn't stay here and simply watch this beautiful, fragile world disappear. Her father had left her a message, and she had to find it before everything fell apart. The garden, beautiful as it was only a stop on the way. She had to move on to find the last, most important part of his legacy. The garden of lost thoughts dissolved into the ether, its memory flowers crumbling into shimmering dust. Luna felt herself lift, then gently settle onto something firm and familiar. When she opened her eyes, a piercing chill enveloped her, and a distant yet powerful hum filled her ears. She stood atop Hogwarts' tallest astronomy tower. The wind whistled around her, biting through her clothes, but she felt no cold. A strange sense of anticipation filled her. The night was moonless, but the darkness was not absolute. Instead, the sky above Hogwarts was inverted. It wasn't black and studded with stars. It was a living canvas, constantly shifting, glowing with a soft, pulsating light. This was a sky woven from the dreams that had been preserved within the castle for centuries. Large, translucent images floated across its surface like gigantic, slow-moving clouds. Luna saw knights in gleaming armor galloping through mist, their swords flashing, echoes of ancient balls in the great hall, where ghostly couples twirled in dance, students quietly whispering spells long forgotten. These were the dreams that hovered within the castle walls, memories that had taken form. Some were bright and joyful, others dark and filled with regret. This was the collective unconscious of Hogwarts, manifesting in the sky. The hum she heard was not the wind, but the whisper of these dreams, a quiet chorus of 1,000 voices merging into a single, all-encompassing melody. Luna felt her own thoughts mingle with this stream, her consciousness expanding, allowing her to feel the echoes of countless lives that had passed through these walls. This was the inverted sky her father had written about. It was the border between reality and the subconscious, a place where truth was revealed not through logic, but through feeling. The air around Luna began to pulse more intensely, and new, clearer images appeared in the sky. They were not the collective dreams of Hogwarts. These were her father's memories, Xenophilius. They scrolled by quickly, like a kaleidoscope, but Luna recognized each moment, felt its significance. She saw him young, full of hope, with a fervent belief in his whimsical ideas, despite the ridicule of others. She saw his fascination with ancient magic, his endless research, his search for truth in the most unexpected places. Then came images that brought sharp pain. The moment he, bewildered and terrified, handed her over to the ministry to save her from death. His guilt. She felt his despair, his helplessness, his immense fear of losing her. He had done it to protect her, but that decision had undoubtedly tormented him. She saw his loneliness after her mother's death, his attempts to raise her, hiding his own sorrow behind a facade of eccentricity. She saw his attempts to explain the world to her, filled with snorkacks and rackspurts, his desire to teach her to see the world as he did, with boundless imagination. This was his love, all-encompassing, unconditional, though expressed in such a strange way. The last image appeared in the sky, Xenophilius, older and weary now, but with a sparkle in his eyes that gazed into the distance. He held the same amulet that turns memory, and his gaze was filled with determination. He was searching not just for truth, but for a way to preserve memory, a way to allow his daughter to find him again, even after his death. He had created this world of dreams, this complex trap of memories, to leave her one last message, one last gift. He wanted her to understand him, his choices, his path. Against the backdrop of these emotional memories pulsing in the sky, Luna felt her own emotions surge forth. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mingling with the dewdrops on her eyelashes. She cried. These were tears of grief for his loss, tears of understanding his pain, his guilt, his boundless love. She mourned not only his death, but also all those moments when she perhaps didn't fully understand him, when she couldn't forgive him his eccentricities or his mistakes. It was painful, but it was also catharsis. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel the full spectrum of these emotions, without hiding behind a dreamy facade, without retreating into a world of fantasies. This was face-to-face with reality. Despite the pain, Luna did not move. She remained standing at the top of the tower, facing the inverted sky, allowing the tears to flow freely. She did not turn away, did not close her eyes. She accepted everything she saw, his flaws, his struggles, his tenderness, his faith. This was her acceptance. This was the moment of choice her father had written about. The moment to decide, to flee from the pain of memories or to confront them, to accept them as part of herself and who she was. And Luna, unlike many other moments in her life when she retreated into her inner world, did not flee for the first time. She stood firm, allowing her memories, her love, and her sorrow to merge. The sky slowly began to change, the images becoming less distinct and the hum fading. Her journey through this world of dreams was coming to an end, and she knew the next step would be the last. She was ready. The ethereal images in the sky above Hogwarts began to dissipate, turning into a light haze that slowly settled onto the walls of the astronomy tower. Luna felt the dream world around her contract, preparing for the last, crucial moment. Sounds quieted, light dimmed, and she realized her journey was nearing its end. The space around her shifted one last time. The astronomy tower vanished, and Luna found herself in a small, circular room. It was strangely empty, save for a single object in the center, a thin, elegant candle standing on an invisible pedestal. This candle was special. Its flame glowed with a bright, constant light, filling the room with a soft, silvery radiance. But, unlike any other flame Luna knew, it emitted absolutely no heat. She reached out her hand towards it and felt no warmth, only a coolness emanating from the light. It was a light that merely existed, without interacting with reality. It was magic that kept memories alive, but did not give them the warmth that only a living person can provide. It could be extinguished, but not by force, not by a spell. She suddenly understood the symbolism of this candle. It was the light that sustained this world of dreams, her father's world of memory. It was the light that kept his presence alive, but did not give it the true warmth that only a living person can give. It could be extinguished, but not by force, not by a spell. She recalled her father's words that some things can only be released when you are truly ready. This candle was the last threshold, the final choice. It could only be extinguished when you are ready to let go of what it represented. The constant presence of her father in her dreams, her clinging to his memory as if he were alive. This was a final farewell, a final liberation. Luna closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her journey through her father's dream world, through his guilt, his love, his eccentricities, ended here. She understood him. She forgave him. And most importantly, she forgave herself for not understanding sooner. She held in her hand the small amulet she had seen earlier in his memories, the one that turned memory. It was invisible to others, but palpable to her. This was the key to this world, the tool her father had used to delve into his own memories. It was a symbol of his quests, his secrets, his desire to preserve what was vanishing. And now, as Luna understood everything, this amulet became a symbol of her own acceptance. With care, filled with deep reverence, Luna approached the candle. She did not try to blow out the flame or use a spell. Instead, she placed the amulet on the fire. As soon as the wooden amulet touched the flame, it did not ignite or burn. Instead, the candle's light trembled, its silvery glow began to expand, engulfing the amulet. It seemed to melt away, dissolving into the heatless flame, blending with its essence. And then, when the amulet had completely vanished, dissolving into the light, Luna bowed her head. Her voice was barely audible, almost a whisper, but it was filled with all the love and gratitude she felt. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. "Thank you for everything. For teaching me to see the world, for showing me how to dream, and for helping me to let go." It was a farewell, but a farewell filled with acceptance, not pain. As soon as the words left her lips, the candle began to dim. Its bright, silvery light slowly but steadily faded, as if its source was depleting. Along with the light, the room itself vanished. Walls dissolved, floor and ceiling dissipated, turning into emptiness. Luna felt a slight sensation of falling, then complete disorientation, as if she was floating in weightlessness. A brief flash of blackness, and then she found herself in an empty room. It was her room in the west tower of Hogwarts. Sunlight, still pale but now real, streamed through the windows. The air was cool and quiet, smelling of dust and old stone, just as it had been before her journey. On the table lay the quibbler and drawings, and on the bedside table, her wand. There was no candle, no amulet, no sign that this dream world had ever existed. But Luna knew. She felt it deep inside. The memories were vivid, the lessons learned. She ran a hand over her face, feeling the traces of dried tears. She was exhausted, but her heart was light. She had passed through the pain, through the past, and emerged stronger. Her journey into the world of dreams was complete, and now it was time to return to the world of reality, with new understanding and a new purpose. Luna opened her eyes. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the familiar scent of damp stone and morning dew. She lay in her bed in the guest room of the West Tower at Hogwarts. The sun, just a thin sliver of light on the horizon, sent its first rays through the tall arched window. They touched the dust motes dancing in the air, giving them an ethereal golden glow. She sat up, feeling a slight weakness, as if she had just returned from a very long journey. Her mind was crystal clear, yet filled with countless vivid, living memories, the garden of memory flowers, the inverted sky, her father's laughing voice. This was not a dream, not just a fantasy. It was as real as the stone beneath her feet. The room was the same as she had left it, a simple table, a chair, a small wardrobe. No silver mirror, no ghostly amulet. But the feeling of emptiness that had haunted her for so long was gone. In its place was a sense of calm, almost completion. She had returned from where time had no meaning, where thoughts took form, where sorrow could be transformed into understanding. She was at Hogwarts, and the dawn of this new day promised something different from the previous ones. Luna approached the table where her journal lay. It was new, with blank pages waiting for her thoughts. She opened it to the first page. Her hand, holding the quill, did not tremble. Words flowed easily, expressing what she had felt, experienced, and understood. She described the letter, the owl that brought it, the strange date on the envelope. She told of the map, of the space between things, of the corridor that wasn't there, and how she passed through it. She wrote about the mirror that showed another life, and the temptation to stay in it, until she noticed the truth. She recalled the garden of lost thoughts and her mother's flower, about the pain and acceptance on the tower where the sky was inverted, and about the candle that glowed but gave no heat. Every word was clear, every sentence reflected the depth of her journey. This was not a report for the ministry, but a chronicle of her own discovery. And at the very end, when she had exhausted all the details, she wrote a phrase that embodied all the wisdom she had gained that night. Some letters arrive exactly when they are meant to. Not when they were sent, not when they were expected, but when the recipient is ready to receive them, when they are ready to understand their true meaning. Her father's letter had arrived just in time. It came when she was ready for farewell, for acceptance, for understanding his love and his path. It came to help her move forward. Luna closed the journal. A gentle, yet profound smile appeared on her face. It wasn't her usual dreamy smile, which always left room for her own thoughts. It was the smile of someone who had found an answer, who had gone through pain and emerged whole. She had not lost her eccentricity or her belief in the invisible. On the contrary, her faith had only strengthened, becoming more grounded. She walked to the window. The sun had risen higher, bathing Hogwarts in golden light. The castle was waking up. She heard the distant voices of students gathering for breakfast in the great hall, the faint rumbling of house-elf trolleys cleaning the corridors. Life went on. Luna no longer felt the need to hide in a world of dreams. She could carry that world within her, but live in reality. She understood that her father hadn't just left her a riddle. He had given her a lesson on how to live, how to seek truth in the unobvious, how to accept loss, and how to find beauty in the space between things. She gathered her hair, adjusted her clothes. Her steps were confident as she left the room. She was not walking into the past, nor into the world of dreams, but into a new day. A day that awaited her, a day full of possibilities. And Luna Lovegood, who had always seen the world differently, now saw it even more clearly, armed with the wisdom that had come to her with the letter that took its time.